for another edition of AHLPSN This Week. TSibs with you today. We got Krok is with us, Fishy Dangles, and Bertone joining us on the show today. And we're going to be talking about, of course, what happened in the last round and what we have coming up in the conference finals starting tonight right here on LG and the YouTube channel. We'll be bringing you those games tonight live and the rest of the playoff games for this round and, of course, for the finals next week. So we hope you're tuning in for that. But we've got to talk about what happened this past week. We had the... Obviously, guys, we had the conference finals this week, and I think one of the things I said on the live broadcast is that it seemed like this may have been some of the best conference finals we've seen. We've seen a few of them that were, just weren't good matchups in past seasons, but I think even... And Fish, you can even talk to this with the, I'm sorry, not Fish, anybody from Springfield that was on those games against Hershey, 5-game series, but 4 of them in overtime, all close games. It was just really good competition, and I guess what Fish can talk to is, you guys were up 3-0 against Rochester and still wound up having to battle back a little bit as they gave you a bit of a fight. So I think all these matchups that we saw in this past week were just were pretty interesting and tight races and just some good quality hockey overall. Oh yeah,
it was a good series. We went up 3-0, and then our third line had to go to get that first game in 4, and I believe we lost 4-0. Pretty sure we got outplayed that game, but we had a lot of chances and we just couldn't bury them. And then the second game, we should have won. We lost 1-0. We outplayed them, but I think it was West in net, and I think it was West.
Yeah,
and he just stood on his head and shut him down. But yeah, they made it a little closer than I thought it was going to be. But you need your third line to come through and steal a game, and they came up shorthanded. But then we threw out Sol and Deer game 6, and they got the job done.
And Krok was looking at some of these games with me this week. We saw some really good matchups, some good competition all around, and you talk about, Fish just talked about West. We saw so many good play by goaltenders all around. I felt like I didn't see a bad goaltender at all in any of these past series. What was your impression, Krok, of the goaltending that we saw this past week?
Yeah, there wasn't a ton of really weak goals being let in. I think all teams really worked for their goals. I think there was the one game in the Wild Series that we were kind of talking about, Dr. Nasty maybe not being the exact same goalie we saw in the regular season for just that one game, but obviously it didn't really affect the team, and he had a great bounce back game the next game. Even on the losing side, we talked a lot about, IC before UC. We talked a lot about West Side, and we talked a lot about Dirty Bird from the Bears, and all of those goalies on losing teams. And we were still mentioning how good and how much they were standing on their heads. So, this is the time of the year where all the bad goalies have been eliminated in the first round, and now we have all the good goalies. So I'm not surprised that they're all playing at the top of their game, and you need that moving into the semifinals now. You're
not putting yourself in that bad goalie group, are you? Really?
100% I am. Yeah, you get 4-0, you got to steal one game at least. But this isn't about me. This is about the semifinals.
and I think another thing that we saw a lot of, and as a forward, Bert can talk to it a little bit. I think we're also seeing a lot of good defense being played. I just think its goaltending has been superior, but the defense in front of a lot of these goaltenders has been pretty damn good. And we talked about the Wild and the Moose, and We talked a lot about the forward lines, but Bert, you could probably talk to a little bit. We talked a lot about the Wild, Tommy and Beast and CJ and all these guys, but their defense was pretty damn good too, and probably on both your teams, the Moose and the Wild, maybe the defense just didn't get a lot of credit for how well that series was played defensively.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely both defense deserve their credit. They're definitely overtaken by a huge offensive powerhouse over in Iowa. But having to play them the 2 games that I played them there, they are crazy on the defensive side.
Right.
You can't get pucks past them. It's crazy. That's why they really only get a couple goals scored on them. They're crazy on the defense back there.
Let's start going over these series too. In the Eastern Atlantic, we'll talk about the Bears and the T-Birds. We mentioned, and of course the T-Birds won this series 4-1. 4 out of the 5 games decided in overtime, in 4 out of the 5 of them were 3-2 finals, which was pretty odd. The Bears outshot the Thunderbirds by 13 shots, and you may or may not realize that just how close this series was in 5 games. But the Bears were in this one every game, and a couple of these game winners in overtime, guys. I don't know if you saw it. Even the Bears game winner. And it might have been Reeder who scored it in game 1. These flips, these little flips onto the net where it hits the goaltender and sneaks over his shoulder. And I think that happened to Reeder, or it might have been Twixter. It was Twixter in game 1, where just a long shot from the left point, really just a wrist shot, winds up going in for the game winner. And there were a couple of those in overtime. So these games could have been won by anyone. Kornick had 2 game winners in this one of them in overtime. But it was just really good play back and forth by both teams. Goaltending by Canuck and Dirty Bird was not bad at all. Both of them above 80% save percentage, both around 2 or a little over 2 goals per game. So, they did their job for the most part. Just good, clean fights where there was some good defense by a couple of players, but really, Bears defense and goaltending, Raider going 4-0, almost an 89% save percentage, 1.5 goals against, and he was facing almost 16 shots per game on average. So, and Twixter in his one game, he stopped 19 of 22 shots in that game 1 loss. So, again, this series to me really showed defense and goaltending for sure made a difference. And the Bears could have very, very easily come out of this with a 4-1 victory in this series. And Fish, I know you're going to wind up going up against the T-Birds. I don't know how much you got to look at any of these games, but I think in my mind the T-Birds would win this series in 5 games or 6, but not as close of every game the way it wound up being. I was just kind of amazed how close these games were, and how well they were played by both teams. And looking at either way, if you played either one of these teams now, Hershey or the T-Birds, you would have had to have faced a pretty good team.
Oh, for sure. I mean, when I get done with my games, I'd look at the chat and be like, oh, go back in OT. 4 out of the 5 games going in OT. I mean, you're 1 bounce away could be going into game 7. Just the bounces went towards T-Birds and they were able to get that goal in OT. But like you said, when you have close games like that, you got to give the props to the defense and goaltending. I mean, there was no blowouts at all. Just a very tight series. And, I haven't played him, which I'm surprised. I haven't played him. We played him 3 times this season. So, maybe I'll get some beginner's luck and take a nice lead tonight. But I look forward to it. But, that was a good series besides the Iowa and other series.
Krok, again, we saw a lot of good defense this week, and I also think maybe one of the questions we had last week was we weren't sure whether or not Hershey was as good as they were just because of that division, and The competition wasn't bad. Obviously, WBS wound up being a better team, got knocked out the first round, but we still had questions about how good Hershey was after the series, despite a 5-game loss. I mean, how did you feel about Hershey's talent and their ability to be in the playoffs? Were they as good as any of the 4 that are in the playoffs now for the conference finals?
It's a pretty good question. I don't really subscribe much to we had a weak division, so we're not as good as other teams. I think, you play so many of the other teams around the league. Like, yes, you play them less in frequency, but you still got to play them, right? And anybody can break down the stats to see that, they beat good teams this year all year, right? So, I think, it's really tough to say that are they good enough, or are they as good as the 4 teams that are left because they beat one of the teams? So I'm probably going to say no in that regard. Just, the Marlies are really good. Like, we know the Marlies. The Moose need no more, press coverage than they've gotten. And the Rampage have been really, really solid in these playoffs. So I would say probably not as good as the Final Four, and if they were, I would assume that they would be here. But, every goal being a 1-goal game, 4 of the 5 games being 3-2 games, that just speaks to great defense, good goaltending, right? If you're letting in 2-3 goals a game for a whole series, you probably think that you're going to win, right? Three goals is enough for an offense to kind of carry you, but both teams played very well. We talked a lot about some of the Thunderbirds' defensive pairings just kind of taking games over, right? Yeah. And I believe it was Corey was the one that we were, really saying like, wow, he's kind of taken this over. It was specifically on a penalty kill in third period. And he was just, working the puck on the boards by himself against two or three at times Bears forechecks. So, that's the type of player and the type of play that you need to get through a series, and especially in these tight ones, right? You got to be able to, move the puck in your own zone, move it out, but also defend well.
We'll move on to the Eastern North and just talk about the Americans and Marlies series. The Marlies winning that one 4-2. We mentioned they were up 3-0 in this one. The Americans rallied back to win games 4 and 5. Marlies closed it out in game 6. Toronto outscoring Rochester by 11 goals. A plus 29 on faceoffs for the Marlies, plus 21 minutes time on attack, plus 23 shot differential. So, a lot of the stats that talk to you about possession of time and the puck in favor of the Marlies in this one. Certainly, this would be the series you would say, okay, not probably the one that wasn't the closest, but a good fight back by the Americans. You can't stop Crosby, Jay Rick, and Touch all going 2-0 in this one. Putting up some points, a couple of goals, and 4 assists for Crosby. West Side went 1-3, but 78.6 save percentage, 3.75 goals against. Had a shutout, but he faced 70 shots in 4 games, and that's about 17, 18 shots per game on average. So when that happens, I don't care how good of a goaltender you are. And if you watch those games, West Side really stood on his head, a couple of them, especially in the wins, and just did as good of a job as he could have. And both we got Krok and Fish, who are also goaltenders. You can do only so much, Fish, when you are getting pummeled with shots. It really, you can be making all the great saves in the world, but eventually we know this game is gonna let a couple in. West Side did his damnedest to try and keep his team in these games, but again, not enough defense in front of him, too many shots on, and that's always going to be a problem for any team to have a chance to win a game.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm pretty sure I said that last podcast. I said I think the problem the Americans are going to have is their defense. For the past, when they got in that little rut, it felt like their defense was just letting the goaltenders down, and they're giving up way too many easy goals. And they let us, like you said, what do we have? 17 shots a game. And then, West and Prime, or it was just West in the games I saw. West, he kept him in there, but then, like you said, eventually stuff's just going to start going in. The defense starts collapsing, getting caught pinching. We had a couple breakaways. I mean, I have to give props to O's line. I mean, you have Prod here. He had 10 shots and 8 goals.
Right.
8 goals out of 10 shots. Orioles had 8 assists. Cred with 4 goals. I mean, that line to come out Sunday night and just give it to them in 2 games really set the series up. But, the Americans just didn't have the defense for the offense that we were going to give to them. And I'm trying to look here at the stats here.
Well, yeah, we saw Prod and Cred and Orioles going 2-0 in this series. Prod, 8 goals, 4 assists, a +10. Cred with 4 goals, 6 assists. And Orioles, a goal and 8 assists. So it's funny. I mean, you could definitely watch, you could definitely see what O's job, and he knows what his job is on that line, and that is to get those guys set up and get in position. And he does his job really well. The Deer, Soul, and Williams line also went 2-0. You yourself, Fish, going 4-0, 90.2 save percentage, 1.26 goals against, and a shutout. Just everything going right for you guys, and having two really good lines, do well, play well, put up good numbers. I mean, again, that's been happening week after week for you guys now since really about maybe 2/3 way through the season.
Yeah.
You guys have been just consistently good every week, and it just didn't stop in this conference final.
Well, I think what changed our season around is when we switched Prod over to left wing and brought O's into center, both those two.
Yeah, absolutely.
It solidified us having 2 lines that could play against anybody. But yeah, since we switched that, we've been rolling, and then the defense finally got into sync, and it's been really fun. We haven't been.
Fish, you want my opinion on that?
Well, because we got rid of you. No.
We're on your team.
Oh, I thought that was Sibs talking.
No.
I honestly think putting Williams back on the Soul and Deer line made a huge offensive push for you guys. He plays tremendous with those guys.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're all talking.
Oh, yeah. But that's what I mean. Like, those solid 2 lines, and they play so well together, you guys really do have, especially those 2 lines, definitely to worry about.
Well, I think it's good for Williams, too. I mean, it's his first taste in the AHL, and, just to be on the top line like that. I mean, I think he's up to 60-something points, but still.
He definitely held his own for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, he has. And he's very defensively good. I mean, he can carry the puck in. I'm not worried about, him getting lit up at the blue line. He carries his own. He does very well.
Well, it's really interesting, and Bert chiming in, because it's obvious that the Marlies have 2 solid lines now, and that can win games at will, basically. How important, Bert, do you think, and I ask you this because I think you've got some guys who are struggling right now beside your line, how important is it to you now at this stage of the conference finals and then possibly the Calder Cup final? How important is it in your mind that you get at least 2 lines solidly playing and possibly 3 before you get any further on in the playoffs? That was for Bert. Sorry. Did we lose Bert? We may have lost Bert. I don't know. I don't hear him unless he muted his microphone. Well, Krok, you there? I didn't lose you, did I?
No, I'm here.
Okay. We'll see if we get Bert back. Let me ask you that, because I definitely want to lead that in. Is Bert there now?
I'm back. Technical difficulty.
Okay. Did you hear the question at all?
No, I didn't. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's okay. Fish is talking about the fact that he's got he's got 2 really solid lines rolling. That Orioles line with Prod and Cred is a big key to why they're doing so well. You guys are playing well. You, Brian, and you guys and Rocky. I'm sorry. You guys have been playing very solid, doing really well, but you're having trouble getting help from other lines on your squad. How important is it to you by time this series starts up that you guys get at least another line consistently contributing and winning games for you?
It's key, honestly. You even seen in our series that my line, we won the first two.
Right.
We honestly kind of thought we might have had it right then, and then we lost another two the next night.
Right.
It's crucial. I would love for our other lines to start to get going, so I could stop. I can not be sweating as much.
Right.
They're proven players, though. We're all playoff players over in Manitoba. It's just a matter of time before they start going. And in the games that you see that they're not scoring as many goals, they still have those opportunities.
Right.
They just kind of got to get it going. As soon as one goes, the floodgate's going to open.
And one other note to make on this one, Fish, you haven't faced. We'll talk about that in a bit. You're going to get a chance to face Springfield for the first time, but do you see any issue with having exposure to a team or not having exposure to your team, or do you feel like you know enough about the Thunderbirds right now to be ready for them?
I know enough about them. I mean, I play club a lot. I know club's different than LG, but at the same time, I played with a lot of those guys multiple times. So I just got to trust the guys in front of me and just do my job, and we'll be all right.
The Western Central Krok had a couple of good series, had a couple of good teams going, with a really probably the most visible series of the Wild and the Moose. And, again, the Moose winning this one 4-2. The Moose had a plus 15 shot differential. Not a lot, but really does kind of speak a little bit to the fact that the Wild offense got shut down fairly well. Go Hawks, really their big scorer with 3 goals and 3 assists. Tommy, 2 goals, 2 assists. Beast, 1 goal, 1 assist. All 3 of those guys went 1-1 in this series. Nitram had a good series on defense, going 2-0 and a +3. And Leafs was 2-0-1 in net, 92.5 goal save percentage, 0.96 goals against, and a shutout. So, Leafs continued to play really well, but at times in the other games, the defense just had some issues, and the offense couldn't get going. And the Moose did a hell of a job, of course, with Bert's line with Brian and Rocky. Everybody playing well. Bert with 4 goals and assists. Brian and Rocky both had a goal and 4 assists, both going 2-0. I'm sorry, all 3 of them going 2-0. They won the first 2 games, as Bert said. And Dr. Nasty going 3-1, 86 save percentage, 1.70 goals against. But let me ask you this, Krok. In this series, they used Tommy and Beast twice in the first 4 games. My question is, was that the right move for them to do against the Moose?
It's interesting because if they were in like really high scoring games, I would say probably not. But I think with that all being said, I think we talk about goaltending a little bit too much, being 3 goalies on this podcast most days. But I'm going to say the Wild D actually played a lot better than I thought most people thought they were going to. Mm-hmm. A lot of these games were close on the scoreboard, but the Wild's offense was the reason why they lost this series. And I don't think any combination of putting Tommy or Beast, in the first 4 games, twice in the first 4 games or not, I don't think it would have made a difference. It went 6 games. It's a 6-game series. It was a very close 6th game to try and push it to 7 games. Utilization from that standpoint, I don't think really made a difference. If anything, it helped having Bert's line go up the first 2 games of the series, if I'm not mistaken. I think that actually helped the Wild, right? I think if you play Bert's line, maybe one of the first 2 games and then one of the next 2 games, I think you probably see this series end a little quicker. But Moose got the win. Wild couldn't score. I don't really see there being a correlation between how Beast and Tommy utilized themselves. I think they were just trying to go power on early, which is probably why you saw that utilization as it was.
But in both teams, and you mentioned low-scoring games in all this, 3-1, 3-2, 1-0, 3-1, 2-1, 4-3. 4-3 was the 4 goals the most anyone scored in these games. So really good defense on both sides. And I want to ask Bert, we talk a lot about your forward line, but I think Krok brought up a good point. we certainly got to see some good defense from Iowa, but your own team played really well. Again, not all about, it's not all about Dr. Nasty and net. It's about your team defense and how well your defenders play, but how well your forwards come back and help out. And even though you guys put up good numbers, I think, we've talked to Brian about this and you about this in the past. You guys have strategies. You know what you're going to do offensively and defensively as a team. And I think that's kind of a key to this game. If you're going to be successful, you have to have a team plan, especially defensively, and it seems like you guys have been able to carry that out every series.
Yeah, definitely. You can definitely tell our team is definitely defense first, especially against a team like Iowa. You pretty much have to play like that, or they're going to score 7-8 goals against. It really doesn't matter if Nasty's in net or not. Those guys are great offensive players. But yeah, we definitely are defense first. Even especially myself, I really like to play as a defensive centerman. But like all of our D, like we got Bob, Aiden, Killa, Pez, Pitcher Swag, and Mafia. All of them are solid defensemen. I don't even really know if you can call one a first, second, or third string D. They're just a solid D core.
And so again, you guys, that line won, winning games 1 and 2. Obviously, the Wild. I don't want to bring up too much of this, but certainly they seem to get rattled after those first 2 losses. They came back though and played well in the next 2 games. You can't argue about that. But it just was a situation where I think maybe the fact that things weren't coming easy for them, and we talked about that last week. Guys, I'll let Krok talk about this first, and then you guys can chime in too. We talked about how as you move on in the playoffs, things can come really easy during the regular season, but once you start moving on level and after level in the playoffs, you start facing tougher teams and things don't come so easy. And it seemed like the guys on Iowa had a little bit of trouble dealing with that, and it got into their head a little bit too much. Did you see it that way, Krok?
Yeah, I did, and I just want to double back on something I just said, because I'm sitting here looking on the site, and I want to give full credit to the Manitoba management team for absolutely stealing away home ice advantage by playing Bert's line twice in the first 2 games. I'm just realizing that they were the away team, and they completely took that home ice advantage away from them by forcing them to match up against their top line. So fair play to that. I'm sure I was going to get some hate mail on that, so I just wanted to make sure I said that first. But it obviously rattled the Wild management team. We saw it in the shout box during the games while we were broadcasting live. And you just, from a management perspective, you just got to kind of, lock it down and at least appear with a, happy face, or try to at least, because that's going to rally your troops. And there was a little bit of rallying happening in the middle of the series, but ultimately fall flat. So, it's tough to. It's tough to win a series when your management isn't directly behind your team. And yeah, definitely, I think they got rattled. They started playing moose. They started to try and play moose hockey, which was the defensive, really leaning on your D-man, and they got away from their offensive game. And maybe that's because the moose wouldn't let them.
Anybody else have some thoughts on that? And just in general, how that can affect your series, having a team get rattled like that. Is that something that you guys try to make sure that your players don't get? Fishy, I'll let you answer because you're the GM of your team.
Yeah, you got to do damage control. I think after our game 3, we got a little chippy in our box, right? And we just had to calm it down. We're still up 3-1, right? You still have your top and second line to go one more game, so there's no reason to panic. But I just want to comment on that series in general, because I took flack as soon as I made the prediction of the Moose in 6. Tommy went after me in the shot box, and but it went the way I thought it was going to go. I would have done the same thing. Would have thrown Bert line game 1 and 2. Right. But if you look at it, not only is the Moose defensively, they shut that offense down, but if you look, they were plus 15 shot differential. Not only did you stop the top offense in the league, you also outplayed the offense, if that makes sense. It went the same way I thought it was going to go. So,
Yeah, I was having a hard time making a call on that game period, just because on that series period, just because it was, it was to me probably the most competitive of any of the series that we saw coming up. We could talk about the Reign and the Rampage maybe in the end being the most competitive one, but before it started, I gotta believe everyone or most people thought the Wild and the Moose would be, are two really good teams, two of the top scoring teams. We said that from that division. Who had the most points? Chicago was there as well, and it was going to be, whoever came out of there was going to be a very strong team to have to deal with, and it was just one that, we even had people say, look, that this could even be a series for who's going to win the Calder, which I don't agree with, but I can understand where that came from, just judging by where the top point scorers were, top point teams were. But yeah, it turned out pretty much what I thought it would be, just because of the matchups. You've got a couple of good lines on both teams, and I think where I thought maybe the Wild had the advantage was that they had had two really good solid lines, where I wasn't sure the Moose had that. But, the Moose got timely playing when they needed it, and got, obviously got Bert's line to win their games. That had to happen, really, and didn't get a lot of production out of the rest of their lines, but just, got enough good play out of them to get a couple more wins elsewhere. And so, the series was pretty much what I thought it was. Two really good teams who matchups, really. In the end, when you have really close games like this, to me, it's all about what the line matchups are going to be and how they handle it. And I think the Moose did a pretty good job in dealing with that in that series. Let's talk about the Western Pacific. We've got the Rampage and the Reign. The Rampage winning this series by 4-3, and it was a story, again, in this series of matchups. Timely scoring, solid defense throughout the series for the Rampage. That just seemed to be the case. They just matched up right at the right time. Game 7, I thought was going to be a decent one for the Reign because, they had that good line going with J-Row there at center, and it looked like maybe that was going to be that, Boone, Hydrate, J-Row line was going to be enough to take them over the edge. But, they just, the way that the Rampage played defensively as a team, and then on the transition, playing good defensively and then getting the puck right out to perfect skills immediately. They did that time and time again, and Patty Ice struggled trying to cover him. He wasn't getting a lot of help. To me, that was a story of Game 7 at least. That's what gave the Rampage the win, and it was not an easy win for them, but the Rampage just played the game that they wanted to and really shut down that good Reign line, who had played fairly well the first couple of games that they were in. But just seems like the Rampage, Krok, always find a way to find an answer on how to beat who they're playing. And to me, that's like one of the most important things you can do as management. Don't worry about what their record was. Don't worry about everything that happened before the series. What do we know about them? Where do we have to shut them down? And how are we going to go about doing that? And it seems like the Rampage have, in the first two series, have found a way one way or another to be able to do that. They won them both by 7 games, but they win them, and they won them against two really good teams, especially the Reign this past one.
Yeah, and this is my scrappy team of the playoffs so far. I chose them to win that series last week, and they made super smart, which I appreciate. But yeah, they have some really good players, and I was just looking down their lineup as you were talking, and just forwards, guys who've played in the NHL before, right? Guys who have had success at the AHL level. We talked about perfect skills. I'm a doer and Codester have been around for a long time, and I think they're well respected around the league. And even as far down as Avis, that guy's been around for a long time. I didn't even realize he was on the team until right now. Mm-hmm. But he only played 2 games for the first 2 series, but on the team nonetheless. But yeah, the Rampage did really well, and I know when we were watching, I believe it was games 3 and 4. Mark and I were talking about the Rampage defense not being able to move the puck out of the zone very well, and they're going to be in big trouble if they keep doing that. And they were able to come back and really adjust, which is the type of team that you definitely can get behind. It's those ones that you can, you can. Making on-the-fly adjustments, which is huge, especially playing against maybe a more highly touted team in the Reign, who had players, and I remember on the podcast last week, a lot of people picking them to win in 4 or 5 games. Like, they didn't even think this was going to be close, right? But it ended up being a lot closer than everyone thought, which was huge, right? So they just got to continue to put their heads down and work. Being one of the, I say lower seeds, but I believe they're still second in their division. But being one of those teams that people don't really expect too much out of, just go in every game and try to adjust on the fly to push your series into the later games. They're going to have all they can handle with the Moose in the next round.
And so with that, we've got the latest playoff grid update here. The Thunderbirds and the Marlies, as you see, the Marlies the 1 seed, the T-Birds number 2. Moose and Rampage on the other side, both number 2 seeds coming into this conference final. And these games, of course, will start tonight. And let's preview a little bit of what's going to happen in these 2 series. Let's start with the Thunderbirds and the Marlies. These 2 teams have played 3 times this season. As you see, Toronto winning 3-0 in all 3 of them. We look back a little bit at these games. It's when you go back to February, obviously, you're going to wind up not having as many of the same players as you did at this point now. But back on February 27th, the Marlies with a 10-2 victory. Seoul with 4 goals. Deere and Williams had 3 goals each in that one. Back on March 19th, the Marlies won 3-2. Both lineups, really, for that game, a lot of traded players, so really not good for current information. One footnote that I want to make sure Fishy knows. Some guy by the name of TSibs stopped 21 of 23 shots in that game. So
I watched that game.
Might have been my best game of the season, oddly enough. And of course the last game, now this is the one that you look at, on April 17th, a 2-0 Marlies win. Prod and Cred had a goal each in that one. Orioles with an assist. Suma and Sandman with assists, so everybody scored for the Marlies in that game. Everybody had a point. On the other side, T-Birds, Raider had to stop 16 of 18 shots, so this is a game that you look at a little bit and say, okay, this could be a bit of a precursor, and like every other goaltender, if you put a lot of shots on net, there's a good chance. Still only a 2-0 win, even with 18 shots on net, so I think that says a lot for how well their goaltending is, of course, with Raider in there. But let's get to a couple of questions for this series. We talked to you already about going up against the T-Birds this season for the first time, Fish. But let's talk a little bit about what the Marlies going to have to do defensively. And we talk about Kornecht a lot. And really being probably their biggest offensive weapon, without going into a lot of detail, obviously. How do you go about dealing with Kornecht offensively? We saw what the Moose did against Tommy and Beast, maybe double, triple teaming him at times. Do you think you need to go that far with Kornecht, or is it more of a team defense concept that you have to figure out?
Yeah, it's more of a team deal. I mean, you don't want to let them just walk in. You don't want to just stick your stick out and take penalties. You don't want any wraps. You just got to play. You got to play smart. Make the, if you're gonna play man to man, you got to be smart and make sure you got backup in case you do get beat. I just think if our defense keeps playing the way they've been playing, we'll be fine. But like if you let Korn go, he's gonna score. I mean, he had 94 points this season. But it also comes to our forwards too. You got to have your forwards come back and help too. You can't just rely on the 2 guys behind you. I mean, everyone has to work together and do their job. You don't do your job, it's going to be a messy series. But I have confidence. It'll be a fun series.
Bert, when you talk about going up against a solid, somebody who's really well up on the front line, somebody like Kornick, how important is it that you think the forwards need to help out? Is this something where you guys just have to keep playing the same game, or do you feel like if you're going up against Kornick's line that one of you or all three of you need to do a little bit more defensively?
Yeah, I would definitely say you definitely need to have a little bit more of a defensive mind. I wouldn't say maybe a double team or anything like that, but just be aware that he's on the ice, be aware that he really can score from anywhere, and just play defense first. That's playoff hockey.
And Krok, we talked about Raider. We've talked about him a lot, and certainly in the last game they played, took on 18 shots. Do you think more shots on Raider is the best way to beat him? We see that a lot with most goaltenders. Obviously the more you put on him, the better. But, he's positionally solid, and I don't know if necessarily just flopping pucks on the net is going to be enough. How do you feel about Raider and the best way to beat him? Is more shots part of that, and there are other things that you need to do to maybe get pucks past him?
I think it's tough to say because no one's really done it yet in the playoffs. No one's really figured him out yet. Right now he's averaging 13.8 shots a game. So that's good for 17th without any filtering. If you filtered out some of the guys who's only played 1 or 2 games, it probably climbs up there a little bit. But, he's getting, I would say, an average amount of shots. It's not like he's facing nothing, but he's also not facing as much as, say, Twigster has been. Right. He faced 9 shots a game through the 2 games that he's played. So, more or less shots. I think it's probably more just quality shots. I think most good goalies are going to stop the, as they call them, shitters from the corners or from the blue line, right? Based on positioning. So I would say just getting quality chances or taking quality shots, right? And that's something that, from experience, I know the Marlies do quite well, right? They do the cross crease very well. They do get you moving as a goalie with the cycling and going behind the net, and Rader's going to have to really trust his defense to kind of cut some of those down in order to not get beaten short side, which is every goalie's job. So I think it's tough to say because we haven't seen a game really yet where he's been exposed. And I don't know if we will yet. So let's see. We'll definitely be watching the games this week, and we'll see where he does and doesn't struggle as it goes. But more or less shots, it really just depends on your mindset as a goalie. I personally love having shots on net. That gets me into a game. So from my experience, I would hate to have 5 or 6 shots a game because then those are probably pretty high quality shots. So it just depends on the quality.
Hey, one more question about this series, and I'm going to pose it to Fishy. We talk about Looped, Sandman, Suma, Barakov, Crazy, who you got later in the season, has been playing very well for you as well. You've just got a lot of good defensemen that are, just playing at the top of the game right now. Talk about how important solidifying that defense at the trading deadline was to you and the team, and how much of your success is based on your defense being so solid.
We had to. We wouldn't be in this position if it wasn't for our defense and making those final trades, because we were in those ruts and there was breakaways, just terrible CHL type play,
right?
Hockey. I was like, I this is not acceptable. So, Loop, we had him last season and he was great for us, but I told him some things he needed to work on in the offseason, and he just came back and he's just been unbelievable.
Right.
He was top 2 scorer for D-men the entire season. I don't know what he finished with, but with the Suma trade, I wanted Suma all season, but I think it was the Monsters. Buds was still there, and you know how that went. He just we finally got him when Buds left and got banned. I was like, I finally get Suma. So I wanted Suma. We got Suma, and I believe Crazy was one of those guys. I didn't know anything much about him, so I can't really comment on that. But he's been doing great. There's some things he could twerk, but tweak, not twerk. He could tweak, and
okay.
but yeah, sorry, but overall our defense is just I think it's a great group of guys.
Right.
I have no problems with either one of them. I wish we could bring them all back next season, but yeah, they're a good group of guys, and those few trades that we made definitely got us to where we needed to go.
Hey, let's move on to the San Antonio Rampage and the Manitoba Moose. As you see, the Moose won the season series 2-1. Not a lot of goals scored in 3 games, only 9 goals. So shots are, relatively close. Time on attack a little bit more, a minute and a half more in favor of Rampage. But, the series, if you look at this, the numbers are relatively close. And again, I'm hoping that people don't think that the Moose are going to wind up sweeping the Rampage or even win this one in 5. I think it's going to be a tougher series. The Moose may prove me wrong, but I've been counting the Rampage out sort of, at least in the last series. We talked about them, Krok, and we, several weeks ago about them possibly being a team that's going to cause some trouble, and they certainly have done that so far. I've taken the Western Pacific, but it's interesting how these matchups went. 2-0 win for the Moose back in mid-February. Jay Hank, the only guy I could really say was there for the Moose at the time in this game with 2 assists. Dr. Nasty, a 6-save shutout. 4-2 Moose win on March 20th. The line of Rocky, Burt, and Brian, a goal and assist each. Dr. Nasty with 14 saves. The game back on April 15th had the Rampage winning that one 1-0. That same line, Rocky, Burt, and Brian went scoreless in that one. NJ's very own 19-shot shutout in that game. And I almost feel, Krok, that may be the kind of games that the Rampage are going to have to win in order to win games in this series. Like, it's going to be, the Moose putting a lot of pressure on, and somehow the Rampage either getting really good goaltending or really good defense, or both, holding off that stampede, and then getting some good transitional goals the other way. If I feel like that's how the Rampage are going to have to win this one.
Yeah, and I think I'm sold on the Rampage now. I think they've got me behind them now.
Ouch.
The thing with the Rampage is that we haven't really seen great goaltending from them in this playoff so far. Both goalies have pretty pedestrian stats compared to their semifinal counterparts, and I think if they do start playing at a good level and matching their counterpart, especially across the ice in Nasty and Arch, I think this is going to be a really close series. Like I said, their forward group is unreal. I really do like what they've got in terms of a mix. They can, pretty much every line, I could say, is liable to win a game. Mm-hmm. I think where we see a little bit of issue is in some of the defensive pairings. We did see an inability to get it out of the zone. We know the Moose are a good counter-punching team. They do cycle and stuff well, but I think where they excel is in their counter-punch. So, you give the puck away to Bert or Brian or Rocky, you're in trouble, right? So you're definitely going to want to make sure that they get it out easily, but I think I'm sold on these guys. I think I really do. I think I really do like them. They've got a stud #1 D-man and a great top line. We saw that versus the rain game, and I think they proved to me in that Game 7 that they could pretty much beat any line.
And Bert, we talked about your last matchup with the Rampage back in April. You guys struggled offensively. If you want to talk a little bit about that game and what you remember of it, but more importantly, what do you guys need to do to prevent that from happening, to change the outcome of a game like that? You got 19 shots on net. I'm not sure what else you could have done in a 1-0 loss, but was there anything out of that game that you can look at and say, okay, I think we need to do something a little bit differently?
Honestly, it was one of those, we all kind of have those games that from the moment that puck drops, like, this game is going to suck. It literally just felt like the puck wasn't moving well. Obviously, like Mylan, we don't really get shut out much. Mm-hmm. But NJ stood on his head. It was like, what do we have to do to get past this goalie?
Right.
I think what the key is going to be is to just change the offense a little. Don't come at him with the same thing over and over and over again, because he's a good goalie. He can read what's going on, so we're going to have to switch it up a little bit.
I don't know how much you've gotten a chance to see these Western teams fish, but again, I think the Moose are very similar to what you might be going up against Springfield. I think the Moose have more offensive weapons maybe, but Springfield certainly has really good offense, good defense, solid goaltending, and the T-Birds and the Moose I think are very similar in that respect. If you're the Rampage on that end, what would you see as a need in order for them to be able to take this series from the Moose? What are they going to need to do mostly to get past them and get into the Calder Cup?
Well, I think it's going to come down to line matching. I mean, like Bert said, if his other lines are somewhat struggling at the moment, and the Rampage can line match and capitalize on that and steal a couple of games, they can make it a series. But if not, I mean, it could either go to a sweep, or it can go to 6 or 7 games if it done correctly. But I cannot pick against the Moose. I'm tired of them getting as much love as they do. But I'm gonna have to. I love Bert and Brian, and the Moose. Their management is one of the few management you've ever had issue with. They're not, how there's some manager out there that just downright mean people. It's just, there's no need for it. But anyways, enough humping the Moose. I'm going to pick the Moose in 5. But, I wouldn't be surprised if the line matching goes in the Rampage's favor, they could steal some games and make it a series.
Hey, Krok, how important is it going to be for the other lines for the Moose to start producing? I think we might have talked about this a little bit earlier, but, Nazi, Lobo, and Snowy, 1 and 2, a -1 in their last 3 games, all low-scoring games, but no good offensive production, really coming out of that. Neither of them have scored a goal. So, they and then Max played with Snowy and Nazi in the Game 5 win, but as a threesome with Nazi, Lobo, and Snowy, they've struggled a lot. Does this, if you're going to manage this for the Moose, do you bring these 3 back and try and get them working together? Do you or do you try and let Max work with Snowy and Nazi as he did in Game 5? What do you do with this? Because Nazi and Lobo have been together and played well for the last couple of seasons, but have just hit a patch here where it has just not gone really well for them. What would your strategy be with this series with the Rampage, with this line?
Yeah, and I just want to start by saying, if your worst problem is Nazi and Lobo playing bad, then you're in a pretty good spot.
Sure.
But I think I like what Nazi, or I'm going to assume it was Nazi, maybe it was a combination of the 3 of them, but I liked the fact that they were able to split them up and still get wins. I think you probably should roll with what you did in the Wild Series, because it was such a good series for them. I don't think you try and change too much, like completely redoing those bottom 2 lines, if that's what you want to call them. I never would count these guys out, really. I mean, I think they'll end up producing at any time. It might just be a little bit of a slow start to the playoffs. Mm-hmm. I have a hard time believing that we're going to see another full round potentially of them not producing. So that makes that causes problem for the Rampage. But I know, like, guys like Pezdemic, right, on the D side, he's 0-3 with a -4. I played this season with him. He is a great defenseman. He is going to bounce back totally fine.
He's not an 0-3 defenseman.
Yeah, he's definitely not an 0-3 defenseman, that's for sure. Right. He was our top D-man on the Devils when he left, right? So I think you just keep doing what you were doing in the Wild Series and just, play the first 4 games, get everybody involved in those first 4 games, and see how. And then moving into games 5 and 6, if you need to make changes, then you make them. But it's going to be really interesting to see how the management team of the Moose decide to match up now that they have the home ice advantage back, pretty much for the rest of the playoffs now. So it's going to be interesting to see if they go, throw one of those 2 lines out tonight and see how they play. and then make adjustments after that. I think this is the series where you probably want to save Bert's line till a little bit later. Just to double back on what I said before, that's what I was thinking. I think this is probably the series where you want to do that, just to give those lines that are struggling a chance to redeem themselves, if you will.
And against the Rampage, Bert, just a couple of numbers to bring up about them. 4th in time and attack in the playoffs so far, with a plus 14. They're 3rd in penalty killing at 87.5, but they have given up the most penalty minutes in the playoffs with 52. And so that might be a place that you guys are going to have to capitalize on if they do wind up pulling a lot of penalties. It could be a place where the Rampage wind up having difficulty, but they've done puck possession well. They do good matchup defensively against the big lines. We've seen that. We saw it in Game 7 against Ontario. Their transition game, as I said in Game 7, was a key, getting a good defensive play and then getting that puck right out of the zone and up the other way. They're getting their number 1 center back this week in DZ10. So with all that going on, I mean, what in your opinion, Bert, what are the kind of the couple of highlights, or maybe 1 or 2 things that you guys have to really be conscious of with the Rampage in this series in order to not take them too lightly and be ready for them?
All 3 of their lines can score. Like I'm not sure who said it, but all these lines can pretty much get a win.
Right.
Either they can get a win or loss, and their goalies are going to steal them a win. So it's going to be a really close series. I think it might honestly even be closer than the Iowa series.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you're thinking could be 6 or 7?
Yeah, like you said, I definitely don't want to take them lightly. Yeah, I'm thinking it might be 6.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, I'll let you all get your final thoughts in on these 2 series. I think I know what Fish is going to say about his series, but if you had to pick on the Rampage and Moose, what is your prediction on this one?
I'm gonna go Moose 5. I just think they're too good, and I know the Rampage can score, but I just think the defense on the Moose is just too good. I mean, Bird's line's gonna put up 2 wins, and hopefully Lobo and them can put up the other 2. So I'm gonna say Moose and 5.
Krok,
you want the Marlies too?
Oh, if you want to give the Marlies, go ahead.
Oh,
it's up to you.
Let's go.
I'm trying to save you. But if you're wrong, I'm going to play it back next week.
No, I'm not afraid. I'll be back. Win or lose, I'll be back. I feel like it's going to go 6. It's going to go Toronto's way.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we got a better team with all 3 lines. So, yeah, it's going to be really fun. So you guys should stay tuned, watch it. And Marlies in 6.
I'll keep Krok for last. Bert, what's your prediction on the T-Birds and Marlies?
I was an S5 Marley, so I'm going to stick with my boys. Marlies in 7.
And well, you've already kind of talked about where you think your series might go.
Chaos in 6.
Krok, what's your prediction on these 2?
Oh, I'm about to not make some friends. Okay. Let's talk about Marlies and Birds first. Mm-hmm. I think this is going to be Birds in 5. Let me explain.
Okay.
Or Fishy sends me some messages after this. I think the Deer Hunter line is going to... If I were the Marlies, which is kind of weird to say, I would go the Deer line up against Kornick directly, best on best. I think they probably split those 1-1 apiece. I think whoever the K-Red line, Prodigy line faces, they're probably going to lose one. And that 3rd line on the Marlies is going to lose both games, no matter who they face. So that's how I see things going. 5 or 6, I'm going to go with 5 for the T-Birds. I just think, I don't think it's going to be as close as people think it is. I think the Marlies have had a pretty easy road to the playoffs, and I say that being someone that they've faced. Mm-hmm. So before everybody freaks out, I think they've had a pretty easy road to the semis, probably the easiest road of any of the teams. And I think, when you play against the Americans and then immediately have to play against the Birds, I think that's going to be tough to adjust to. So
this is just in. Fishy's asking me if I know where you live.
I live in Toronto, bud. Come.
I already know where you live.
sometime.
I got the enhanced Michigan license across that bridge.
Oh man,
Quick and easy, buddy.
If I'm not back next week, then it's either Fishy or it's going to be Bert. So let's move on to this next series.
I have nothing wrong.
I'm going with the Rampage in 7. I think the Moose are going to be dethroned by my Rampage.
Wow. You really aren't making any friends, are you?
I am not. I think Bert's Lion's finally going to lose a game. I think they're probably going to split with whoever they face against. And I think it's going to be splitting the whole way. Every line will get a win and every line will get a loss on both teams. And I think when you get Rampage in a game 7, they've already had 2 so far.
Sure.
The Moose haven't faced elimination yet, and I'm always going to bet on the team that's faced elimination twice already. So I'm going to go with Rampage in 7.
Bert, I'll pick you up. Go.
Yeah, I have to go opposite, and not just because these guys are here. I just like. Look, I obviously I played for the Marlies for half a season, but I'm a defense and goaltending man first, obviously, right? But I just love what the Marlies have on defense. They're incredibly strong, 2 solid lines. If somehow the T-Birds match up where they can get an advantage and things work out for them, they may have a chance in this one. But I see the Marlies in 6. And on the other side, I see the Moose in, I see the Moose in 6 too. I tell you what, if it goes to a game 7, I would not be adverse to picking the Rampage because, like you said, they have confidence in winning a game 7. They've done it twice already in this playoff. But I think the Moose are just so strong, and I kind of feel like Nazi and Lobo are going to come back and play their game and get some success in this series. It's not going to be a lot of success. They're not going to be scoring hat tricks every time they're out there, but I think they'll get enough success where they're gonna take a game or 2, and if they can play together and take a couple of games, I think this easily will be a 6-game win, maybe even a 5-game win for the Moose. But I hate picking against the Rampage because I've never been right about them so far. But I would go Marlies and Moose, and we'll talk about what happens next week when that comes up. So I also don't want to piss off Fishy, because he has a temper. I've seen that.
Why does everyone say I'm such an angry little fish?
I didn't say you were a bitch. I just said you're angry.
Everyone's like, oh, there goes raging fish. I don't rage.
No,
I mute myself.
You're not Barakov, that's for sure. I wouldn't compare you to him.
Yeah, well, it'd be nice if that guy showed up. Let me tell you. I mean, we have him on the 3rd line right now, but it'd be nice if he became the old Bara, because then I wouldn't be sweating either.
No, so, you're making him back.
Bara's listening. Bear's listening. Need you to come back. Drop the ego and come back and play.
Well, let's hope he does for your sake. But listen, guys, got Fish and Bert. Thanks for coming on today. I appreciate you guys being here. Best of luck tonight, and this has been a lot of fun so far. I know it's Fish. It probably drives you to an early ulcer, but it's got to be somewhat fun to see all this come to fruition finally.
Oh yeah, all that work and management came up short last season in that game 7, and it's been fun. Glad we're here. Win or lose, I'm glad.
All right, guys, good luck. We will talk to you probably tonight if we can after games. Krok, thanks again. Appreciate you coming on, helping me out today, buddy.
No problem. And
we may have Marks back next week. He's on a trip right now, but he will hopefully be back next week. And tonight we're going to try and bring you those games live. The 9:30 and 10:30 games for both series tonight. So stick around, and we will bring you the live action of these games tonight. You've been watching AHLPSN this week. I'm TSibs for Krok, Bertone, and Fishy saying so long, and we will talk to you later.